Friedrich Nietzsche was born in 1844 in a quiet village in the eastern part of Germany, where his father was the priest. He did exceptionally well at school and university, and so excelled at ancient Greek that he was made a professor at the University of Basel when still only in his mid-20s. And when he was only 44, he had a mental breakdown, precipitated when he saw a horse in a Turin street being beaten by its driver, and ran over to embrace him, shouting, "I understand you." He never recovered, and died 11 sad years later. 1. Own up to envy. Envy is, Nietzsche recognized, a big part of life. Yet the lingering effects of Christianity generally teach us to feel ashamed of our envious feelings. They seem an indication of evil, so we hide them from ourselves and others. Yet there's nothing wrong with envy, maintained Nietzsche, so long as we use it as a guide to what we really want. Every person who makes us envious should be seen as an indication of what we could one day become. 2. Don't be a Christian. Nietzsche had some extreme things to say about Christianity. In the entire New Testament, he wrote, there is only one person worth respecting, Pilate, the Roman governor. It was knockabout stuff, but his true target was more subtle and more interesting. He resented Christianity for protecting people from their envy. Christianity had, in Nietzsche's account, emerged in the late Roman Empire, in the minds of timid slaves who'd lacked the stomach to get hold of what they really wanted, and so had clung to a philosophy that made a virtue of their cowardice. In the Christian value system, sexlessness turned into purity, weakness became goodness, submission to people one hates became obedience, and, in Nietzsche's phrase, not being able to take revenge turned into forgiveness. Christianity amounted to a giant machine for bitter denial. 3. God is dead. Nietzsche's dramatic assertion that God is dead is not, as it's often taken to be, some kind of a celebratory statement. Despite his reservations about Christianity, Nietzsche didn't think that the end of belief was anything to cheer about. Religious beliefs were false, he knew, but he observed that they were very, very beneficial in the sense of helping us cope with the problems of life. Nietzsche felt that the gap left by religion should ideally be filled by culture. He meant philosophy, art, music, literature. Culture should replace scripture. However, Nietzsche was deeply suspicious of the way his own era was handling culture. He believed the universities were killing the humanities, turning them into dry academic exercises, rather than using them for what they were always meant to be, guides to life. He called for a reformation in which people, newly conscious of the crisis brought on by the end of faith, would fill the gaps created by the disappearance of religion with philosophy and art. Every era faces particular psychological challenges, thought Nietzsche, and it's the task of the philosopher to identify and help solve these. The concept of the Superman is one of the strangest, most fascinating ideas in philosophy. We find it coined by Friedrich Nietzsche in his book of 1883, Thus Spoke Zarathustra. On first hearing it, we can't help but think of the action hero Superman, described by his creators as faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, and able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. These are actually very good starting points. DC Comics were asking themselves what someone would be like who was physically far superior to all current human beings. Nietzsche is asking himself a very similar question, only he's interested in psychological qualities. In Thus Spake Zarathustra, Nietzsche points out that evolution cannot be assumed to have finished. Human beings have evolved from apes. But what is ape to man, he asks. In some respects, like imagination and science, we're obviously far superior to our ancestors. So how might people of the future be superior to who we are today? Nietzsche wasn't interested in massively enhanced brain power, an ability to do hugely complex sums in one's head, or to learn a language in 3 days. Rather, he was developing a crucial thought experiment. Suppose we were psychologically superior to people today, what would we be actually like? What is the ideal kind of human being? And he came up with a very surprising and challenging answer. Nietzsche's strategy for answering his own question was to identify the person he most admired, the person he thought had the best approach to life, and then home in on the qualities that made this person the way they were. he was particularly impressed by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, whom he regarded as the nearest anyone had yet come to being a Superman. He also took some hints from Napoleon, Montaigne, Voltaire and Julius Caesar. He concluded that supermen are going to have some wonderful and sometimes unexpected characteristics. They will make their own values. They'll be very independently minded. They won't ask, what do other people admire, and follow along. They'll carve their own path. Supermen accept that they might need to hurt people in the name of great things. They can be selfish in strategic ways. Supermen will never be resentful of the success of others. They'll accept suffering as a necessary component of good things. They'll understand that they're hard to understand, and that therefore they may often be lonely. They'll be gentle towards the weak, out of consciousness of their own great strength. They'll be a little bit wicked around sex, by conventional standards. They'll not be humble, but rather delight in their own abilities. They'll be interested in the practical application of culture to raise the mentality of society. Nietzsche thought we would be surprised and sometimes a bit shocked by his list. He thought we'd be expecting that the superhumans of tomorrow would be deeply compassionate, very egalitarian, uninterested in rivalry, and perhaps have ambitions to make breakthroughs in science. But Nietzsche was arguing something else, that maybe being great involves some qualities that are a bit disturbing, and also that greatness means being interested in the salvation of mankind through culture. The word Superman is useful for getting us to think about who we would like to evolve into. Each of us should, under Nietzsche's guidance, have a sense of what we would like to be if we could be the super version of ourselves. The idea of the Superman helps us to refine our own ambitions.